Well, happy Tuesday, everyone. I had a very interesting question that came to my mind, and I've done a little bit of researching and digging around it, but here it is. What if I told you that the collapse of the Russian Federation would not be the celebration that you would like to think that it would be? Now, eliminating Vladimir Putin, I think, is a positive step, but unfortunately, in this particular case, the fallout is going to be so disastrous that nobody is prepared for it. Russia has fallen apart twice before in history, and the world was not ready either time. First one was in 1917 when the Tsarist Empire fell and Tsar Nicholas was removed from power and ultimately executed. And of course, the last one for those of us who were not, super young, we lived through the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Now, in the case of the latter, the Soviet Union broke up into 15 different independent states. And however, in this particular situation, a framework was in place that allowed a reasonably organized dissolution to occur. That's not going to occur this time. Of course, right now, the Soviet independent states that came out of that were, again, 15 of them. The Russian Federation, of course, being the largest one geographically and population-wise, which, of course, cut across the entire main geographical body of the Soviet Union itself became the Russian Federation and became Russia. So that's the big one, and of course the rest of them are the Baltics. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania finally got their long craved independence. Ukraine, of course, famously became independent, which has gotten us to the Ukrainian war today with the invasion that Putin made in 2022, because Putin wants to reestablish the Soviet Union and the Soviet sphere of influence over the independent countries. Kazakhstan, of course, being the geographically the second largest of the bunch. Kazakhstan is one of them. Kyrgyzstan is another. Turkmenistan, the world's wackiest dictatorship, was another one. The Soviet Union dissolved, and nobody gave them the notice, basically. And Kazakhstan, I think I already mentioned that one. That's one of the big ones. And Moldova being another one of them, which is, as we are going right now, Moldova is seriously in lockstep with Romania right now to reunite as a single state, which doesn't have Putin very happy. Obviously, he wants to continue to have a stranglehold over Moldova, but they're getting away. With the Ukraine war going as bad as it has for Putin, he is not. His hold on power is very shaky at best right now. And so then it comes down to, okay, what happens if the Russian Federation itself breaks up? Well, let's see. Let me explain how the Russian Federation is geographically divided at this point. There are 89 political subdivisions within the Russian Federation. Each one of them has its own economic strengths, weaknesses, and each of them are controlled by either oligarchs or independent militaries. Now, these 89 subdivisions add up to one country that owns 5,500 nuclear warheads. Who gets those 5,500 nuclear warheads? Well, we don't know this time, because in 1991 it was the Russian Federation kept the lion's share of those. Which of course made sense, because Russia was the core of the Soviet Union. And so they kept almost all of the nuclear warheads. This time that's not going to be the case, because You have 89 political subdivisions on the one front. You have a series of oligarchs, wealthy people who became wealthy off of the Soviet breakup. They control governorships in a decent-sized minority of the subdivisions. Now, each of these subdivisions also, some of them have their own grievances with Moscow and Putin over the past 20 to 40 years. And this is something that has been festering for quite some time. And we are... so I'm gonna throw in the Russian Far East as an example. The Russian Far East, which is Primorsky Krai and a few other of the subdivisions that nearby it. Primorsky Krai, the capital city is Vladivostok. You may have heard of that one. That is the easternmost major city in the Russian Federation is Vladivostok. It is their Asian port. It is the Russian Federation's gateway to trade with the East and even some of the West. But this area is also called Outer Manchuria, which is an area which China once controlled. Now, you go back into the 1800s, and Russia stole a lot of land from the Chinese dynasties in this period, which were extremely weak in the mid to late 1800s. The Chinese have not forgotten this at all. They have long memories, and they're playing the long game and have done so excellently for 150 years now. China recently put out a map of Primorsky Krai in the Russian Far East with their original Chinese names. Putin, of course, is furious about this, but Putin also can't anger China too much right now because they are buying most of the Russian petroleum. Speaking of the Russian petroleum, a lot of that is in an part of Russia, the central part of Russia called the Caucasus, which is a mountain chain that includes independent-minded subdivisions such as Chechnya. They would like to control most of the petroleum in a Russian breakup. They in turn are also governed basically by a warlord at this point. So you have warlords that are political, and then you also have warlords that are private, corporate warlords. You know, they protect the companies that pay them. And they also have independent mercenary warlords such as the Wagner Group, which is probably the most famous of the group. The Wagner Group could take control of a fair number of the nuclear warheads, depending on their geographical placements. This is also a group that has marched on Moscow before, but Putin made a lot of concessions to them. And so therefore they are not at war with the Russian Federation at this point, but they were back in 2022, shortly after the invasion of Ukraine. Then you've also got territories, with other ethnic minorities such as the Sakha Republic, which is also in the far east of Russia, but it's actually mostly north of the Arctic Circle. The Sakha Republic is home to the world's coldest city of Yakutsk, which has a population, despite its location, a population of 300,000. The Sakha Republic as a whole has an area of 1 million square miles and has a population of also 1 million. The Sakha Republic is home to some petroleum resources, but it's also home to rare earth minerals and gemstones. It's basically the diamond capital of Russia. And they are ethnic minorities. The Yakuts, the Yakut people or Yakutia people have had grievances with Russia for many decades now. They have enough money, I believe, to make a break for it themselves. And I think they would drag along the easternmost territory in the Russian Federation with him, that being the Chukotka Autonomous Okrug, which is as far east as you can get in Russia and still be in Russia. In fact, some of Chukotka extends into the Western Hemisphere. That's how far east it goes. It goes so far east, it's basically west. When Sarah Palin, when the jokes were coming out about her being able to see that she could see Russia from her house, Chukotka was what the Saturday Night Live was joking about. Chukotka is resource rich, but also population and human capital poor. Chukotka is a very large area, larger than many Central European countries, larger than Hungary, larger than Romania, but at the same time, population is only about 45,000. A lot of people have just decided that living in temperatures that are 60 below in the wintertime is just not worth it. And I can't say I disagree with them. So Chukotka would like to be independent because they are ethnically Yakut for the most part. Only about 20% actual Russian, which is the Russian population that emigrated there back in the 20th century for economic reasons. They would like to make a break from the Russian Federation, but they also, the only subdivision that they directly border is the Sakha Republic. And so I think the Sakha Republic would take them along. The ocean ports, the small ones that Chukotka has, are valuable. Anadyr is the capital of Chukotka. A Russian governor was appointed to rule as governor of Chukotka in the 2000s and up to about 2008. His name is Roman Abramovich, a very complex figure. Russia is set up to extract resources from territories such as Sakha and Chukotka. And so Russia sent Abramovich to be the governor. Now he's a complicated figure. In addition to being able to extract tax advantages for his own companies as an oligarch, he was very generous in providing a social net and social contributions and imported food for a population that direly and desperately needed it so bad. As I said, he's a complicated figure. Abramovich also owned the Premier League in Great Britain, Chelsea. And Abramovich had has a whole lot of yachts and things like that were sanctioned later on by the West. And so, but his generosity with this republic, with the Chukotka Autonomous Okrug as its appointed governor, still makes him a very popular figure there to this date. Would he be part of any independence movement? I don't think so. I don't think he's looking to upset or infuriate his friend Vladimir Putin. But who knows? He has quietly, and he's a quiet man, by the way, quietly been disgruntled with the Putin regime. Now, as far as breaking up the Russian Federation goes, no, it's not a good thing because we got almost 5,500 nuclear warheads. We have no idea where they're going to go. We have oil that we have no idea where it's going to go. We have loose mercenaries out there, such as the Wagner Group, that would have no subordination to nobody at all. We would have ethnic minorities that would have subordination to nobody at all, such as Yakutia and the Sakha Republic and Primorsky Krai, the Russian Far East. An area that was subjugated by Russia a century ago and taken from China, which of course Vladivostok was originally what is now known as Outer Manchuria. So the Chinese are going to be nipping at their buds there. I think they're going to make a move for Sakha. Because ethnically, the Yakuts are tied to the Chinese. And so in this massive environment of chaos, the European Union and NATO in particular are not going to have a good time with this either. The United States is not going to have a good time of this either, because there'd be no single figure to try to control. You would have dozens of ethnic minorities who are all seeking independence. You would have a whole bunch of loose cannon mercenaries, both corporate and individual, that would be running around loose.